on the side of him, he fell down and he got shook. And I just stood on top of him, grabbed him. And next thing you know, NYPD was there.
Okay, so that situation happened. And then a bit after that, in Atlanta, Suge's best friend, Big Jake, gets killed in a club. And this part's kind of fuzzy, but there was a rumor that Wolf was the one that did it. Puffy got blamed for it and so forth. But I guess Wolf wasn't the one who did it, but still there was some sort of blame that Suge had on Bad Boy over that situation, right?
I don't know if Suge had blamed Bad Boy for that because the situation never came, when I got with him, the situation never came to us like that. Now, I've heard Wolf talk about it, and Wolf told me personally that he didn't do it. And I know everybody knew the guy who did it. It was this dude, he's dead now. He got killed in Atlanta about 2 or 3 years ago. His father was from the Bronx and he owned the cleaners. Now, did Wolf and them know him? Yeah, they probably knew him. He was from the Bronx, his part of town. His father owned the cleaners. They knew this guy. You understand? Him and Jake was arguing over this chick or whatever. Now, did Wolf do it? How could Wolf do it when he was next to Suge? He was right next to Suge when Jake got killed. But everybody want to say Wolf did it because that glamorized the situation.
Right. Okay. And then after that, Wolf actually reached out to you and asked you to come back to Bad Boy and help out with security.
Well, I told Wolf he had to straighten out his thing with Slick. We met on 125th Street, me, Slick, Rico, and Wolf. Him and Slick talked and everything, and it was cool and everything. So he said, yo, Gene, I need you to come because we need somebody who was in law enforcement or legal that could carry a gun and everything to be with us. He said, and if you ran after me, and this was his own words, because I didn't see it and I didn't know it at the time. You know, he said, if you ran after me and I had a gun in my hand, I want you on my team. I said, I don't fuck with Puff like that, bruh. He said, from the city college here. He said, yo, you're going to have your own contract. You're going to have your own days. All you got to do is listen to me and make sure he good. I said, all right, man, we'll see. And that's when I went back.
Okay, so you joined the security team at Bad Boy with your own contract.
Right.
And Wolf was already over there, and Big Paul was over there as well.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, Paulie. And Paulie was kind of Puffy's everyday guy?
Yeah, Paul was the guy who Puff helped him set up a security company, had him set up a security company. So he did the security at the house, the apartment building or whatever, and Sean John, and over at Bad Boy and the studios. So he set up all the security for those places.
You won't believe this, but it seems like Diddy's past keeps coming back to haunt him. And this time, it's not just about his music. His former head of security, Roger Bonds, has spilled some jaw-dropping tea about Diddy's encounters with Suge Knight that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the hip-hop mogul.
I did was Puff.
Okay. And I guess every so often, Puffy will put you with Big during certain events and so forth, right?
Well, like if we was on stage or Big was on stage, he felt threatened for Big, I guess. He said, yo, Gene, go watch Big. I said, all right, cool. It wouldn't matter.
Okay. So you doing some work for Biggie, did the two of you kind of form a relationship?
I think me and Big we formed a relationship on 2 occasions. One, when we was in D.C. doing Howard University. He made Puff shut the door down, and the people shut the door down, and it was D-Rock. I think D-Rock's birthday is the 17th, mine is the 16th of October, and he made him shut down the place, and just me and D-Rock bought like 5 outfits together, and then everybody else bought an outfit. And then Big used to just give me all the clothes that he didn't want. Like, you know, you had Nike, Lugs, you had Mecca clothing line. They would bring big boxes to Big everywhere he was at. And then he was like, yo, whatever he didn't want, he'd say, yo, D-Rock, you want this? D-Rock was like, nah, I don't want it. He said, yo, Big Gene, you want it? And then I was like, man, I'll take it and give it to the guys on the block, you know, who was with part of our crew or whatever. But the kid was just good like that. And then we had a situation when we were in Atlanta that something was bought, and he thought I was going to lie about it because Puff was trying to say it was his, and it wasn't his. It was Big's. And you understand? And when he said, and they had made a bet that I was going to go on Puff's side. So when I got to the studio, I said, nah, Puff, you had that one and Big had that one. And that's what it was. And Big looked at me, and you could see a smile in his face like, yo, this nigga's honorable.
Okay. And before all the drama began, did Tupac ever come around? Did you ever see Big and Tupac interact together?
No, I never seen Big and Tupac interact together. I seen Puff
okay.
and Pac interact together, but I didn't see
really?
Big, yeah.
In what capacity?
Like we was at Roxy. They used to give functions and parties there. And then one time me and Puff walked up in there. It was, this was after Pac got shot and everything like that. And it was Pac and like 4 other guys. And Pac put a cigarette in his mouth. The dude lit the cigarette. I started laughing. I was like, who fuck like a cigarette for? Like that. So then him and Puff talked, and that was it. Was nothing.
Okay, and then the incident happened at Quad Studios.
This was after the incident at Quad, when I seen Pac with Puff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when the...
So, imagine this, it's 2010. Diddy, the face of Bad Boy Records, is living his life as usual. Late-night burger cravings, luxury cars, and an entourage that makes you think he's untouchable. But behind the flashy image, there's a story that shows just how vulnerable even the biggest stars can be. According to Bonds, one night, Diddy's craving for a burger led to an unexpected and intense moment with none other than Suge Knight, the infamous CEO of Death Row Records.
Diddy Combs has been denied bail in connection with the sexual abuse and sex trafficking charges he faces. And as Les Trent reports, the music mogul who once traveled by private jet to all those mansions is now in a jail that is notorious for its bad living conditions.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs spent his first night behind bars inside a facility that is being called Hell on Earth. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn is notorious for its appalling living conditions and rampant violence. How bad is it inside this federal lockup? There have been 2 murders, 4 suicides, and numerous stabbings and lockdowns in recent years. It's so out of control inside that 4 federal judges are reportedly refusing to send any more prisoners here. Donald Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, spent a harrowing year in federal custody. He says for someone used to a life of luxury like Diddy, prison life is a severe shock.
You have a desk, you have a plastic chair, you have your bed with a 1.5-inch mattress, no pillow, and you also have a locker. So you basically have 3 feet by 5 feet to move around. So you have a basic 15 square feet. It is a horrible, horrible place.
Diddy's lawyers were so eager to keep him out of jail, they offered his palatial $48 million home in Miami Beach and his private jets as bail. Today, they are even offering to restrict female visitors to his homes, except for his mother, daughters, and the mothers of his children if he is released. They told the judge the jail he was being sent to is dreadful, dirty, inhuman, and an ongoing tragedy.
How's your dad doing? How's your dad doing?
Family members appeared somber as they arrived at federal court in Manhattan today in another attempt to get out on bail. The judge cited Diddy's history of violent temper and potential intimidation of witnesses as reasons for keeping him behind bars. Diddy's former protege, singer Aubrey O'Day, is celebrating Diddy's downfall today. I feel validated, a win for women all over the world.
Combs has pled not guilty.
Now, let's set the scene. It's late at night, and Diddy sends his assistant, David, along with a security guard named D-Rock, to pick up some takeout from Mel's Drive-In Diner in Los Angeles. Seems innocent enough, right? But as fate would have it, Suge Knight pulls up in his car at the same
Sean Diddy Combs back in a New York City courtroom, we believe right about now, as he tries to appeal a judge's ruling, which denied him bail and sent him to jail as he awaits trial in the explosive sex trafficking and racketeering case against him. Prosecutors describe a large criminal ring orchestrated by Combs to sexually abuse dozens of women, drugging them, beating them, and recording sexual acts for at least 15 years. The move from the judge to hold the musician mogul in jail before his trial comes as prosecutors argue Combs, his massive wealth, makes him a flight risk. And they're also accusing him of witness tampering, trying to keep both them, witnesses, and his victims silent. Combs' team offered a $50 million bond agreement, with his attorney claiming Combs is, in his words, eminently trustworthy. The judge didn't buy it. It is a stunning fall from the height of pop culture. Combs, however, is pleading not guilty and has denied any wrongdoing. Let's bring in NBC's Chloe Malas for more. And Chloe, there are no phones, no electronics allowed in court.
We actually have breaking news. We have some breaking news right now. According to NBC News, just moments ago, I'm reading off my phone right now, Sean Diddy Combs will not be released. And this is per the district attorney's office. So let me explain and silence my phone and break down what exactly that means, or else my kids will call me during this entire segment. So this basically means, Tom, that now Sean Diddy Combs sits behind bars until this potentially goes to trial. Why do I say potentially? Even though his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, spoke to CNN last night and said that it is very unlikely that he would accept any sort of a plea deal. And we don't even know if a plea deal would even be on the table with these very extreme criminal charges of racketeering, transportation when it comes to prostitution and sex trafficking. We do know that this could be potentially a year behind bars. I was talking to NBC's legal analyst and correspondent Laura Jarrett earlier today. And, you know, there's so many motions and, so much discovery to do, as you know, and you've covered things like this, I'm sure, that it takes a while to get ready for a big criminal trial like this when there's so many charges and so many different grand jury subpoenas and things like that. So currently, though, he is in jail. And that's what it is. Everybody asks me the difference between jail and prison. You go to prison after you've been found guilty. Right now, he's in jail, and he's in jail in Brooklyn. And this is one of the main issues that his legal team had, was that this detention center in Brooklyn has seen suicides. It saw somebody get killed over the summer, food contamination, overcrowding, and they listed all of this in their filing to the judge. But clearly, this federal judge was not persuaded, Tom. And so now that's it. He stays behind bars while he waits to have this tried in court.
Bond claims that Windrock stepped out of the car, Sedge did too, and just like in a scene from a movie, the two men were face-to-face exchanging tense words. DCK, realizing the gravity of the situation, called Diddy to let him know what was happening. That's when things took a dramatic turn.
A celebrity, that's an understatement. He is an icon. And what are the chances that he gets any sort of preferential or royal treatment in the jail? Or, given the charges that are so significant and serious against him, is he going to be treated like any other inmate?
That's incredibly hard to say, right? When you see, and I don't want to generalize here, but when you do see, let's say, accusations against minors, which we don't see in this indictment. You can sometimes see some of these high-profile alleged criminals maybe put into solitary confinement. Will he be treated like any other inmate while he's in this detention center in Brooklyn? It's sort of left to be seen. I think that over the coming weeks, we'll see what happens and what types of motions that his team files if they feel as though he is under immediate threat, or if he gets, beat up in prison or in jail. See, I made that mistake. If he gets beat up in jail, or if something like that happens, I guess maybe always things could change. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein, for example. Not that I want to compare the two, but Harvey Weinstein has been been treated in a medical ward because he has all of these medical issues, right? And so the judge had decided even today that he can still stay in the medical ward. So again, I think it's a case-by-case basis, and we have to see how this all plays out. But let's just put it this way. Sean Diddy Combs is a billionaire. He achieved billionaire status in 2022. He is not going to be happy, Tom, being in jail. And this is a far cry from his multi-million dollar homes all across this country. So obviously it's a huge fall from grace for somebody that was such a pioneer in the music industry.
Yeah, but to your point, Chloe, if it were you or me, not suggesting either one of us would ever face these kinds of charges, but there is no way we'd be out on bail or bond, right? I mean, these are incredibly serious charges that could land him in prison for years and years and years, and they involve violence, not to mention.
According to Bonds, Diddy didn't hesitate. He gathered up the thing that he had to gather up and drove his black Cadillac to the diner. Can you imagine? Here's Diddy, a man with millions at stake, heading straight into what could have been a dangerous confrontation, but before things could escalate, Drock convinced him to turn around and head back home. Talk about a close call.
If you are a potential defendant in one of these cases and someone's suing you, would they typically require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed once they settle it with the plaintiff or the victim in this case?
You know, if I was an attorney representing one of these individuals accused, I would certainly request for that before agreeing to any out-of-court settlement. Otherwise, it kind of takes away the point of doing it out of court. It's going to end up being public. I might as well continue to fight the allegations.
And sometimes, Catherine, when you're a victim in human trafficking or sex crimes like this, money can't always satisfy you. And do you foresee any of these individuals, whether it's men or women, coming forward later, even though they've signed the NDA, even though they've been paid, saying, look, it was me and this is who did it?
Well, after you get paid, right? Okay, and you done spent that money, and then you got to take care of the I, the R, and the S, who are real pimps, then they're going to talk. You know, what's done in the dark comes to the light. And who? I know you don't have a 50-foot bed in your backyard, do you?
Don't assume too much.
I'm just trying to tell you. But it's interesting because I was, you know, I've been following it, and today on TMZ, you know, it was stated that a celebrity that's bigger than P. Diddy, the Fed.
This story doesn't just stop there, though. Bonds also brought up another instance where Diddy and Sudge reportedly crossed paths. This time at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Surprisingly, the two decided to keep things civil, exchanged numbers, and even discussed Suju's youth football outreach program. Who would have thought these two could sit down and have a conversation like that?
Denied his request for bail a second time, and the place where he's locked up now getting a lot of attention. The Metropolitan Detention Center, the only federal jail in New York City, is known for violence, poor conditions, and a string of celebrity detainees. And Diddy's attorneys want him out. NBC News' Yasmin Youssian has more.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going...
But Don't let this moment of peace fool you. The tension between Diddy and Sudge has been a recurring theme in hip-hop. History Bond's revelations come amid even more explosive claims.
Legal analyst is Michael Moore. Michael's with me now. Let's just deal with the, if you will, the logistics before we turn to the gravamen. The refusal of bail in these circumstances, bearing in mind he'd flown to New York to turn himself in, so he was preempted by the police. Are you surprised that he was refused bail?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the nature of these charges are so serious, the allegations are so serious, that it's not surprising that this hearing he was denied bail. The judge has to look at things like whether or not he can be expected to return to court. Does he have the manner and means to perhaps evade law enforcement and not appear? Is he a flight risk, in other words? And so I think at this point, the judge has decided that the fact that he was doing these acts in secret do not obviously lend much to his statements that he will be open and available. So I'm not surprised at all. But again, we will see what the district judge now does since the case has been, or the decision has been at least appealed up, whether or not there are some terms of bail that might make the court comfortable that he will show up for court.
Now, turning to the charges themselves, they are amongst the most serious, which would involve very long periods of incarceration if convicted. But it also raises the question, if there was a plea deal at some point in the future, to plead down from these very serious charges, the lesser accepted offences would also be serious and could end up in prison.
I think any plea discussion of the case, because you have such significant impact on the victims of the case, would necessitate that he be sentenced to prison in some way. I just don't think that a judge would take and place him on probation or some type of house arrest, given the allegations that were made, no matter what the plea discussions were. And remember, the prosecution and a defendant can negotiate a plea amongst themselves, but a court has the decision finally on whether or not to accept that recommendation, and ultimately has the authority to make a decision about whether or not a prison sentence is appropriate. We operate under the federal sentencing guidelines. Those give the judge some parameters to consider, things like whether or not somebody accepts responsibility, whether or not there have been an adverse impact on victims, whether or not there's been excessive fraud and deceit through the investigation of the case. Those things come into play as we talk about what might happen if there is a plea agreement that's ultimately reached.
It's important to remember, besides obviously he's innocent until proven guilty at the moment, but it's also important to remember that not being a nice person, being an unnice person, if you will, is not a crime. They're going to have to prove the elements of the offences in these cases. Just because he might not be likable is not enough to get you locked up.
Well, I mean, that's exactly.
Ex-LAPD Detective George Kading recently alleged that once ordered a $1 million hit on Tupac Shakur and Sue Knight back in 1995. This accusation isn't new, but every time it resurfaces it stirs up fresh debates about the unsolved murder of Tupac and the dangerous rivalries of the Nines hip-hop scene.
Right to have his case tried in court, and the government has to prove that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment, the allegations we heard from the United States Attorney in New York, these are sordid details. They are particularly troubling as it relates to whether or not the allegations are true, on whether or not certain people, victims in the case, were given drugs at the time to get them to do these sex acts, whether or not there's been some effort to blackmail or extort or silence victims in the case by the use of videotaped, and to call it pornography would probably be too nice. I would just say dark type of pornography. It sounds like these are things that a judge is going to have to consider as we go forward.
Finally, back to the logistics, if you will. He was prepared to turn himself in today, so we understand. The arrest removed from him the almost right to bail. Since I was going to turn myself in, I'm entitled to bail if I'd had turned myself in. By arresting him, the prosecution removed that possibility.
Well, they certainly removed the argument for him to make that he had turned himself in. It's mighty hard to, when you fly into town on a jet and you're there, to argue that there's no possible way you could be a flight risk. And that's one of the things the judge would consider. Another thing would be the nature of the charges, the allegations that were made. They spanned a long period of time. There were efforts to influence witnesses, it sounds like. At least that's been an allegation that has been made. These are all things that get put into that decision. The fact that he just would have turned himself in, that would have been in his favor. But there are so many other factors at play that it wouldn't have surprised me to see a court dig into those a little bit in making a decision on whether bail would be appropriate. And at this stage, a judge has determined that bail is not appropriate. He has a right, and has done apparently so, to appeal that decision and have another hearing on it. At that time, his lawyers will have a chance to make these arguments about the efforts that he was making to cooperate and to get there. The term cooperation, frankly, sometimes gets to be a little loosey-goosey.
And as if that weren't enough, Sudge himself has added fuel to the fire during his prison podcast Collect Call with Sudge Knight. He accused Diddy of being an FBI informant, claiming that this was an open secret in the industry.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe NBC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat.
In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's other federal jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons spokesman telling NBC News they, quote, take seriously addressing the staffing and other challenges at MDC Brooklyn, adding the director appointed an urgent action team and they've increased staffing.
MDC has his.
If true, this would be a bombshell revelation about one of the most influential figures in hip-hop.
Tremendous problems, and the problems aren't resolved.
Combs' lawyers originally hoping he could await trial under house arrest at his mansion, now arguing for him to be moved to a prison in New Jersey in the lead-up to this trial, citing the prison's poor conditions, violence, and deaths. On Wednesday, his lawyer said he was being held in a special housing unit with an extra level of security.
Yasmin's back with us now. So what is next? Is he going to be in jail in this facility until the trial begins? Is there a chance he could, get moved earlier than that?
As of this moment, as of this hour, as of today, yes. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to be appealing this thing next to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the judge's order here to try and get him actually released to his mansion on $50 million bail, wanting a GPS monitoring system, limited visits from family members, friends, so on and so forth. That is what they're proposing because of course, the violence I talked about in that piece inside these jail walls. They also, in the meantime, Hal, want to get him moved to a jail and/or prison in New Jersey. The judge so far has essentially said that is up to the Bureau of Prisons to make that decision. Nonetheless, it's all going to be on appeals leading up to the trial. His next court appearance, by the way, October 9th. So looking for that, of course, and any decisions coming out from the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals on this order.
But let's rewind a bit and dive deeper into what Roger Bond shared in his interview. One of the most fascinating aspects of his account is how it humanizes Diddy. Here's a man who's often portrayed as invincible, a mastermind of the music industry, yet in these moments he's shown to be just as vulnerable and reactive as anyone else. Bonds even mentioned that Diddy's then-girlfriend Cassie was terrified when she saw him rushing off to confront Sue that night. Imagine being in her shoes, watching someone you care about possibly walking into danger.
Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs will try for the third time to get bail today while he awaits trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City where this hearing happened earlier today. Alex, there was already a hearing earlier this week looking at notes taken out of Sean Combs' cell. How could that impact his chances at bail? His team says that raiding his cell, monitoring his calls, is not allowed and not fair to allow him to prep for a trial.
You know, it'll be interesting to see if this ends up happening. We just got out of this hearing nearly 2 hours long, and they only talked about these notes at the very beginning. They discussed essentially whether or not they said the word legal on them, and there was a bit of a discrepancy from the defense. Essentially, they backtracked on this even just a little bit. Essentially, he has these binders, legal pads that, according to the photographs from the raid on his cell, did not say the word legal. All of a sudden, now they do. And the defense couldn't exactly say when the word legal was written. And that matters because if it said legal on any of these notes, that is part of attorney-client privilege. Those are things that should not have been taken out of his cell. So there is a big question about that. But Nate, the bigger issue here now is he going to get out? As of tonight, he is still going back to his jail cell. But next week, we will know whether or not he is going to be able to get out until his trial. So the big discussion here, according to the government, is can they trust him? He has proposed a whole laundry list of things that he's willing to do if they'll let him out. Things like 24/7 security, things like not speaking to anybody, not having internet access, phone access, unless it's through this 24/7 security company. But the government and pretrial services, who is separate from the prosecution, they're not buying it. They're saying that they cannot trust Sean Combs to not follow the law or to not follow the rules that he has even set out for himself. They say because he's already broken the rules that the department, the Bureau of Prisons, and his own counsel have laid out for him within a jail cell. So they're essentially saying if he can't do it there, how could he do it in the comfort of an apartment? They had tried to get him released to Star Island, his home on Star Island right in Miami, because it's an island and there's a dock there. The judge immediately said absolutely not, because in theory he could,
And this isn't the only instance where Diddy's decisions have been called into question. Bond's story aligns with other allegations that paint a picture of a man who's not afraid to take risks, sometimes recklessly so, whether it's his alleged involvement in orchestrating hits or his willingness to face such night head-on. Diddy's actions reveal a side of him that's far removed from the polished image we see in public.
So what his defense team has now proposed instead is bringing him to an Upper East Side apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment where they say they would have 2 security guards inside of his apartment at all times, 1 downstairs. Again, the judge has not really said whether or not he is keen on this. He didn't really disclose if he's leaning one way or another, but he did ask a lot of questions about what that would look like. Again, the government not buying it, as well as pretrial services, which is the organization, the department that would have to make sure that everything was on the up and up.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder also, whether there was discussion of that now infamous video back from 2016 of Combs beating his girlfriend at the time, Cassie, the, entertainer. Did that get discussed at all in the hearing today?
It did, because the defense is saying that the prosecution basically took the video that CNN originally published and gave it to the judge in that exact form, which is that it was edited down and they say out of order. They say essentially that the video ends with Cassie being dragged back to the room. They say that's not how it happened. They say it's important to know that that is not how it happened. But according to the defense, they say, or according to the government rather, they say it doesn't really matter because what you can see is what happened there. Her getting beaten up, her getting kicked, all of these violent things in nature. And what I don't think has been reported enough is that the allegation here isn't just that it was a squabble between the two of them, that it was the defense calls a lover's quarrel, but that inside the hotel room down the hallway, that there was a male sex worker there that was part of these freak-offs. So it's not just about the abuse that happened in the hallway, but the prosecution wants to bring this into evidence because of what was actually happening inside of that hotel room. Now, the defense maintains that that wasn't the case. They maintain that the fight actually happened because he was just trying to get his phone and clothing back. But even still, this video was even used today in the discussion about how violent they believe Sean Combs is and why he cannot be released on bail.
Yeah, Alex, I read about 90% politics all day long, but I mean, this is one of the stories that, breaks through, especially coming from the entertainment industry. Such a big entertainer for such a long time. Safe to say that this story not going anywhere anytime soon. National correspondent Alex Miller live in New York.
Now let's not forget the historical context here. The feud between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records was one of the most infamous rivalries in music history. It wasn't just about business, it was personal, and it had real-world consequences. The deaths of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious Big remained two of the biggest tragedies in hip-hop, and the events leading up to them are still shrouded in mystery and controversy. Every new piece of information like Bond's account adds another layer to this complex and often dark narrative.
The A-list celebrities linked to Diddy and his alleged sexual assaults are trying to keep their identities private. That's according to Houston attorney Tony Busby. He says he's already privately settled some of the accused. That's after his firm sent out demand letters. Diddy is currently locked up and facing multiple charges, including racketeering and human trafficking. Despite 2 requests to be released, Diddy has been denied bail. His mother, Janice Combs, has spoken out for the first time since this arrest. She released a statement. It reads, "It is heartbreaking to see my son judged not for the truth, but for a narrative created out of lies. My son is not the monster they have painted him to be, and he deserves a chance to tell his side." Joining us to talk about it here on The Factor Uncensored tonight, we have defense attorney and former Harris County prosecutor Bioji Akingbala, Harris County Precinct 1 trafficking director Kathy Griffin-Grignon, and radio personality J Mac from 97.9 The Box. Glad to have you all here on The Factor Uncensored. So, J Mac, when you hear that there could be more people out there, more celebrities, right, who are already settling cases quietly, are you surprised? Are you shocked?
That's a smart thing to do. You don't want us in your business. You don't want to be on the Isaiah Factor.
On the morning show, right?
On the morning show. And then you heard his mom. She's doing what a mom is supposed to do. If you pay my bills, I would say, hey, that's not the guy I know.
But then again, of course, you don't treat your mother that way. You may not tell your mother what's going on.
Come on, man. His mama know. Oh, his mama know.
Trust me. I'm being naive. The naivete is showing tonight.
Your mom is going to always know what you're doing. You might think she don't know, but she know.
Got it. Bioji, let's talk about some of the celebrities, which no names have been named as of yet, who may have settled these cases. Is that the prudent, smart thing to do?
I think considering that these civil cases are closely tied to the federal case that Diddy's facing, it's certainly a smart thing to do to perhaps try to get your name out of the public eye, get your name away from the specter of the federal investigators, and just try to settle your case privately, assuming that there is some sufficient evidence to believe that these civil attorneys have something on you.
Now, if you are a...
What does this all mean for Diddy's legacy? On one hand, he's a music mogul who's built an EMP empire and influenced countless artists. On the other hand, stories like this remind us of the darker side of the industry and the high-stakes drama that comes with it. It's a world where rivalries can turn deadly, and even the biggest stars aren't immune to fear and conflict.
Back with an exclusive update on the federal case against rapper Sean Diddy Combs. NBC News has learned that a federal grand jury in the Southern District of New York is expected to hear new testimony today.
Combs' legal team did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He's being held at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center.
NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas joins us with more on her reporting here. Chloe, good morning. Good to have you with us. So what can you tell us about the testimony expected today?
So NBC News actually spoke to the attorney for this male who's going to be testifying this afternoon around 3 p.m. in front of a grand jury. Her name is Ariel Mitchell. She has represented other civil accusers. And this is incredibly significant because I was at the last hearing for Combs in downtown Manhattan, and I listened to Emily Johnson, one of the U.S. attorneys, one of the prosecutors who is trying this case, say that there might be another indictment. So this just goes to show you that federal prosecutors, that criminal investigation is ongoing. Now, it's unclear what this man will be saying. Remember, grand juries are secret. You know, you're not supposed to know the date and when the grand juries are convening, but obviously we have this great reporting, and we know that a male is going to be testifying this afternoon, and it's unclear if there will be more charges coming. And like you said, Diddy's legal team, they haven't responded because they can't comment on grand jury proceedings, and the U.S. Attorney's Office hasn't said anything either.
So that's the latest on the criminal side. There's also some civil issues here. Combs faces more than a dozen civil lawsuits. The most recent was filed on Monday. Only one has been settled so far. What's the timeline looking like for these civil cases?
So he has been coming out denying all the accusations against him, both criminal and civil, and he has been fighting them. As we know, he settled with Cassandra Cassie Ventura, his ex-girlfriend, last year for an undisclosed amount of money that was reported to be in the tens of millions of dollars. But I do want to point out something that's really interesting. Last night, a ruling came down from a U.S. district judge in New York stating that one of the civil accusers, a woman who remains anonymous, she goes by Jane Doe, in this civil suit filed by Tony Busby. He's the attorney out of Texas that has filed several lawsuits against Diddy. The judge ruled that this woman had to reveal her identity, or in a few weeks, she's actually going to dismiss this entire case. And this is incredibly significant because could that mean that other civil accusers will face the same fate and have to come forward? The judge said that the idea that she needed to remain anonymous because she was afraid of Combs potentially hurting her or threatening her seemed unlikely because he's currently behind bars awaiting trial. They also said that, yes, in the ruling, the judge said, yes, it's humiliating. It's hard to come forward and to put your name out there, but that does not outweigh the reasons for you having to come forward and put your name to it. So we've reached out to Combs' legal team for comment. This is a win for them. They haven't said anything. I've also reached out to Tony Busby, who filed this suit, and he was the one that filed those new lawsuits, Joe, on Monday. So again, it'll be interesting to see if this affects these civil cases. And again, Combs is expected to go to trial on May 5th. So it's going to be interesting to see, though, if things are going to get pushed back, or could this extend the length of the trial if there is another criminal indictment?
Yeah, and that's that criminal trial. And you do think that that will stay on track for May?
So according to both sides, they believe that this is going to take place on May 5th. But if there are more criminal charges, it could mean that about a 2.5-3 week trial could extend to even longer.
As for Suge Knight, his reputation precedes him known for his intimidating presence and alleged involvement in numerous crimes. Suge has always been a controversial figure. His claims about Diddy being a snitch and his involvement in past rivalries only add to the intrigue. Whether you believe Suge or not, there's no denying that his words carry weight, especially given his history in the industry.
Going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat.
In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's other federal jail, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons spokesman telling NBC News they, quote, take seriously addressing the staffing and other challenges at MDC Brooklyn, adding the director appointed an urgent action team and they've increased staffing.
MDC has historically had tremendous problems and the problems aren't resolved.
Combs' lawyers originally hoping he could await trial under house arrest at his mansion, now arguing for him to be moved to a prison in New Jersey in the lead up to this trial, citing the prison's poor conditions, violence, and deaths. On Wednesday, his lawyer said he was being held in a special housing unit with an...
So where does this leave us? Bond's revelations are just another piece of the puzzle, shedding light on the complex relationships and high-stakes confrontations that defined an era of hip-hop. They remind us that behind the glitz and glamour,
Music
there's a
mogul
world of
Sean
tension,
Diddy
rivalry,
Combs
and
back
yes,
behind
fear.
bars. A magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, my concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors. Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges. But prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged the judge to remand him. She did. And when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
But perhaps the most striking takeaway is how these stories make these larger-than-life figures feel a little more human. Diddy rushing to confront Suge Knight over a late-night burger run and then being convinced to turn back is a far cry from the polished image we see on red carpets and magazine covers. It's a reminder that even the biggest stars have moments of doubt, fear, and impulsive decisions.
Diddy is now being accused of obstructing justice.
Diddy running the jail, man. He running the spot.
Right. According to you, the inmates are fighting over making his bed.
Yep. Well, really, according to Lisa Evers, I want to give her credit. Lisa Evers does an amazing job covering all things, within the New York metropolitan area. She interviewed an inmate that spent some time at MDC Brooklyn alongside Diddy. And, remember, we're all thinking that Diddy's like in super isolation. He doesn't talk to no inmates. We later find out via even court filings by the government, he does. And this one inmate looked like he's not wrong because he says, hey, listen, Diddy's such a big player in the game in terms of, his power and he's that guy even in jail. Dudes are getting jealous at other dudes based on who made his bed. And I'm like, yo.
So that's a real thing? Yeah. People are actually making his bed?
Yeah.
I thought you were just joking.
Listen, there's an inmate that said it. There's an inmate that said it, that Lisa Evers, who works for Fox 5.
No, I know Lisa. Yeah. I've done her show before.
Of course. So that's what that inmate said. And I think some people wanted to call it cap till we realized that, the filing that came out on Friday or Thursday by the government, which is a response to Diddy's new motion for bail, essentially said Diddy is using like 8 other inmates, like, personal access codes to call everybody he wants.
Exactly.
It's like, add this person to the call, add this person. Yo, like he's running the jail. So these inmates, I completely believe, and by the way, this is how the government painted it. He's getting them paid directly through what they call these cash processing systems.
Yeah.
So, probably tells his people, send her $1,000. Send his mom, send his girl, cool. And then the inmate in there with him is like, yo, we're going to have your commissary filled. You're going to move around like a king like me. So I get why this is happening. And the only thing I look at is like, why did people believe or think anything otherwise? Like, you think you're going to normalize a billionaire that could have any type? Like, if Diddy walked in a room and this guy's of significant money, power, and even respect, despite whatever happened, and y'all are all in jail, you're not going to be like, yo, Bro, he usually don't got to bring his tray over there to throw it away. Now I'll do it because I want to be cool with him. I got my people outside. Like, shit, I have a public defender. This guy is spending $2.7 million a month on lawyers. He could throw me, even if he throws me $2,500. Hey, nobody can touch Diddy in here. Matter of fact, I'm going to act like I could be the most bitch-made dude. Hey, I'm just letting y'all know, anybody want to get to him, y'all got to go through me. I'll take the ass whooping for it. So this kind of sounds normal. However, I think people thought Diddy was done when he got to jail. Like, okay, you're finally a regular person. And they're realizing, you know, Diddy didn't work all them years to get billions.
As for Roger Bonds, his candid account provides a unique glimpse into a world that most of us can only imagine his. Stories not only entertain but also offer valuable insights into the dynamics of the hip-hop industry and the people who shaped it.
Billions can't help him, right?
He still Diddy.
Yeah, he still did it. Come on.
Well, I mean, I went through the filings and the reports. So what they say, according, to the feds, that recorded phone calls made by Diddy show that he asked family members to reach out to potential victims and witnesses. Also urged them to create narratives to influence the jury pool. Also encouraged them to make marketing strategies to sway the public opinion. Diddy used the telephone accounts of at least 8 different inmates to avoid monitoring. He paid the inmates to intermediaries in violation of the rules, like you said, and he also was using 3-way calls and getting people on the phone, which is illegal. So basically what they said, the defendant has shown repeatedly, even while in custody, that he will flagrantly and repeatedly flout rules in order to improperly impact the outcome of the case. The defendant has shown, in other words, that he cannot be trusted to abide by rules or conditions. And I guess they actually found a note that inferred that he wants to blackmail victims and witnesses into silence by providing testimony, or into providing testimony that's actually helpful to his defense. So I guess what I'm wondering is, he does realize all this is being taped. You're using someone else's, privileges, but they're watching everything.
Okay.
A 3-way call, it's being recorded.
So my takeaway was much different from that. My takeaway was, I'm going to wait for the government to file a superseding indictment, which we all believe is coming, because right now it looks a little thin. And it looks a little pathetic, I'm going to be honest with you. Because, yes, it's great to make Diddy look like this maniacal mob boss, which, of course he's using the influence of his money. But does anyone, again, it's good for the person who never ever dealt with someone in jail. How many inmates, and Vlad, no names here, how many inmates do you know that do 3-way call? They all do it.
Yeah.
They all do it.
I talk to inmates
and it's always
on cell phones while locked up in Rikers.
Exactly.
And not going to say who.
And no one is saying, yo, Vlad, this is to influence my case. Sometimes they just call, be like, yo, what's the word out there, man? Everything good? You're like, yeah, I'm going to come home soon. It's all good. Blah. Sometimes it's never. So that I thought was a little bit thin. Obviously, they're trying to keep him in jail. Him putting money on other people's books. Yeah, he's a rich guy. He wants to have his privileges, right? Now, this whole thing of him trying to blackmail people, and I hate to even, because some people are going to be like, oh, no, he's getting Diddy's back. No, I'm defending someone who is, and this could be anybody, who's locked up and using whatever he can to his advantage to try to get things looking better for himself before he goes to trial.
Yeah, but some of this stuff is illegal. You can't
everybody does it.
You can't, it doesn't matter if everyone else does it. For everyone else, there'll be a slap on the wrist. Everyone knows this is a big fish. No slaps on the wrist when it comes to Diddy. They're going to prosecute.
So what do you think? Do these revelations change how you see Diddy and Suge Knight? Do they add to the mystique of their legendary feud, or do they make them seem more like ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances? One thing's for sure, the story of Diddy and Suge Knight is far from over, and we likely hear more twists and turns in the years to come.